All right. Now, can you hear me? All right. Good morning. The first one was just for practice. So, if you grew up in church, or if you found yourself in any kind of institution, or if you simply married into a family, hopefully other than your own, you will understand the sentiment held in this phrase. But we've always done it this way. From deep conversations about what makes the best sides for Thanksgiving, any suggestions? Or to that age-old debate, hymns or courses, or our natural resistance to anything that's kind of a new system or policy, all the way to our deeply held belief that what we have created could never have run its course. All of them exclaim loudly, but we have always done it this way. These words show up in all kinds of ways and in all kinds of spaces whenever change is on the table. In a lot of examples, it's really harmless. Sure, we'll try your green beans again this year instead of my delicious macaroni and cheese. And it really is. Except my kids kind of think the stuff that in the blue box. I make homemade macaroni and cheese with all these different cheeses, and I think it's so amazing. And they're like, Can you make the yellow one, Mom? So I just had to get that out of my system. So we have all sorts of things that are just like harmless concessions. But other times, the resistance to change or the invitation to change can lead to abuse, marginalization, the death of an organization, the loss of vitality in a system, the crash or end of something long before its time, all because we're stuck on how it's always been. It is the confrontation of how it's always been done that lies at the center of the book of Luke. The author is convinced that how it's been done or how it's always been does not mean that that is how it has to be. And at times he even goes so far as to suggest that just because this is how it always was done does not mean that that is how it was supposed to be. Now, those are fighting words on the best of days, but imagine those same words spoken into centuries of how a people thought about or engaged with God. Even more so, imagine that these ideas are being confronted with the possibility of change affected every aspect of your life. It would change the way that you ate. It would change the times that you worked. It would inform the way that you rested, the festivals you celebrated, the modes of harvest, how you used and spent your money, how you ran your business, the way you saw yourself, and the way you saw your neighbor. All of life was centered on these ideas about who God is and what God is like. Their ancestors had understood this. Their parents and grandparents had understood this. They understood this. Ancient prophets had predicted it. Interpretations of the Torah had confirmed it. Kings and priests had proclaimed it. And no matter what the words spoken from their mouths echoed, they could never shake these long embedded ideas about what God was like. After all, God as they saw it, God as they knew it, fit. So why rethink, why reconsider, why reimagine that God could be anything other than what we have spoken and sung and celebrated for generations? And while we may like to think that we might be different in the face of change, when we get new information or expanding ideas, even we find ourselves strangely uncomfortable with the idea that just because that's how it was always done doesn't mean that's how it's supposed to be. We too can feel safe, and we too can feel a sense of urgency when renouncing such ideas that confront long-held perspectives. We have always done it this way. In the face of great change, one thing is always true. Change is hard. Now, Luke is a Gentile author writing most likely to a Gentile audience about a very Jewish leader. And he presents the notion that the ideas that have been long held about God are clarified, are shifted, and are changed in the light of Jesus. And he suggests that as the events he is writing about are unfolded in real time, the revelation of God in Jesus was unexpected. What they were looking for, what they expected, was more of the same. They wanted stories similar to their history. They wanted some kind of hero to rise up and conquer, some kind of general to defeat their enemies, someone to raise their profile, to elevate their status, to ensure that they win. And then comes Jesus. From the very beginning, Jesus is unexpected. From Mary to Joseph to the star rising in the sky, a birth in an unexpected space with unexpected visitors that spans from the simplicity of shepherds to the reality of angels, a baby is born. God in human flesh arrives on the scene, and nothing is as expected about this moment. Those we might imagine would immediately notice and celebrate are instead the very ones who seek to kill him or just miss the significance of the moment altogether. Then, as Jesus grows, he finds himself in the temple, speaking with the religious leaders. His words amaze them, but no one expects that this child could be anything more than some kind of unlikely prodigy. And so Jesus grows and shifts and changes, and he is hidden in plain sight. It is obvious that this could not be the one that they were waiting for. This could not be the one they imagined they should look out for. And then if you go to Luke chapter 3, you read this long list of Jesus' ancestors. And we can be sure that if you go through that list, that even those, the generations that led up to him, those who came before him, would have found Jesus to be an unexpected answer to their prayers. The unexpected fulfillment of the words of the prophets, the unexpected promise revealed, the unexpected Messiah, the unexpected God in human skin. Jesus, unexpected, except for two. There are two who took notice, two who immediately knew who Jesus was. The first is Simeon, an ordinary man who had so devoted his life to God that he measured the length of his life according to the arrival of the Messiah. He longed to see face to face the one who would rescue Israel before his death. And so on the day that Jesus is presented in the temple, the Spirit leads him to where the baby is and where the parents are, and he immediately notices that it is Jesus. He exclaims with great joy that God's light has been revealed in this child, and then he offers a prophecy that the child is destined to cause some to fall, some will oppose him, others will experience great joy because of him, and he is a sign of God to the people. And as Simeon holds the child, Anna, a woman who has spent much of her life in the temple, walks by and immediately begins to praise God because the Messiah has been born, the one who will save Jerusalem, the one sent from God is among them. Jesus arrives perhaps not how they expected, yet somehow they took notice. It's right here where we have the temptation to suggest that we would be far more like Anna or Simeon than all those who walked by and aware that Jesus was in their midst. Yet history would tell us a completely different story. History would tell us that most often than not, those who should most readily take notice of Jesus are often the very ones who walk by, somehow unaware that the divine is among them. We may preach Jesus, we might read about Jesus, we may even call ourselves ones who follow Jesus, but noticing Jesus, that is where we struggle. And perhaps a glance at Anna and Simeon might help us to understand what it takes to be ready to notice Jesus. Now, Simeon is noted as living a life that's really engaged with the Spirit, and Anna as someone whose life is intertwined with God. And so when Jesus shows up in the mix of the unexpected and the expected, their temporal selves and their spiritual selves are somehow ready and already prepared to notice, even in the midst of the unexpected. It seems that noticing where God is, noticing what God is doing, noticing Jesus is simply an extension of who they are. And I think cultivating that type of connection with God is a worthwhile pursuit, one that requires what Wesley may call the works of piety. Things like taking communion together, gathering for worship, caring for our physical bodies, prayer, fasting, engaging with Scripture. But if Anna and Simeon, despite their great devotion to the practices that help them take notice of God, it was not simply by having their heads down. It was not simply by their knees being bowed and by the frequenting of the temple that enabled them to notice. It was also being ones who are aware of those who are around them, listening to what was happening in the world that surrounded them, and conscious of what was happening beside them, that enabled them to notice where God was, what God was doing, and that Jesus was in the room. And so I might suggest that we may find ourselves immersed in the most pious of practices, yet removed from knowing our neighbors, and thereby missing out on noticing Jesus. We might find ourselves faithfully praying, calling out to God with fervor and consistency, yet quick to turn our eyes away from what we see all around us and miss out on noticing Jesus. We may find ourselves calling out every chapter and every verse, memorizing every word of the Scriptures, yet remaining blind to those the same Scriptures call us to love. We may find ourselves fasting and praying, worshiping till we sense we are right next to heaven, yet comfortably distant from the stories, the plight, the lives of those who are right beside us, missing out on noticing Jesus. When the practices of faith keep our eyes closed to the world around us, ignorant of that which happens around us, then we are made less capable of noticing Jesus. Because Jesus is not just found in Sunday morning church services. Jesus isn't just found at altars or in prayer closets, at prayer meetings, or at big conferences. Yes, we might catch a glimpse of God's glory there. We may have an encounter there. But when we come to the Gospel of Luke, we're going to find out that, yes, Jesus is found in the temple, but Jesus is also out in the fields. He's found praying in the wilderness, but he's also at dining tables with the unwelcome. He's found among the religious, but he's also among those who are hungry, those who are sick, those who are tied down by great evil, and among those who tear down every barrier that keeps some in and others out. Both Anna and Simeon's deep connection with God did not lead them to walk around with their eyes closed, with their ears shut, with their senses dulled. Instead, it was their lives interconnected with God and led by the Spirit that prepared them to look around, that prepared them to see, that prepared them to take notice of Jesus. So here's the challenge for today. You guys are so quiet. I'm trying very hard to keep that inside of me. I know, every Sunday I say, you're not going to say that. Every Sunday afternoon I say, you're not going to say that. And here I am. So here's the challenge. Are your eyes opened to notice Jesus in unexpected places? Are your ears tuned to hear his voice, not only in the quiet of prayer, but also in the cries of the lonely and the marginalized and the foreigners, those who might be forgotten? Are your hands willing to embrace that which may disrupt your comfort, your routines, your "but we've always done it this way" rationale? Are you ready to take notice of where Jesus is? Because Jesus is still showing up. He's showing up in the neighbor that you may have overlooked, the conversation you just might have avoided, the mess you'd rather not step into, and the story of the one you didn't think you had time for. And if we have the courage to dive in to the life that is led by the Spirit and intertwined with the heart of God, when we get up from those moments of prayer, when we arise from those seasons of fasting, when we emerge from those times of worshiping, if our eyes are open and our ears are listening and our feet and hands are made ready by those very practices, then we will notice Jesus everywhere. We'll start to notice Jesus in these expected places and the unexpected ones, breathing life where death resides, offering second chances when you have run out, whispering comfort when grief wants to consume you, offering courage where fear lingers, being hope where hopelessness and defeat have come to take over. And as ones led by the Spirit, as ones intertwined with the very life of God, we will hear the whisper and the invitation that comes from the heart of Jesus to each and every one of us. Come and see. Come and see. Join in this messy and beautiful, surprising and love-filled work that I am doing. The worship team can come up. And when God is moving, when the Spirit is singing over us, when Jesus is leading, be prepared to feel these words in your bones. This isn't the way we have done things before. When God is moving, when the Spirit is singing over us, when Jesus is leading, I want you to be prepared to feel this in your bones. This isn't the way we have always done things before. Because Jesus shows up in the unexpected. So may we be like Simeon and Anna, led by the Spirit, lives intertwined with God, made ready to see, ready to listen, ready to notice the unexpected Jesus. Let's stand together. So for those of you who are connected with the Beach family, this weekend we will be hosting a funeral here for Adam's aunt, Arlie Marie, and some of you would know her from days gone past. I got a really interesting time to hear her story, and it was beautiful and bright and full of light. And so that will be at 11 on Saturday. But as we go into this week, I want us to take one more look at Simeon's words to Jesus' parents. He says, "This child is destined to cause many in Israel to fall, but he'll be a joy to many others. He has been sent as a sign from God, but many will oppose him. As a result, the deepest thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your very soul." And if I can summarize that into a really quick statement, is that Jesus shows up in ways that are expected and unexpected. And sometimes the reason why it's hard to take notice of Jesus is because we actually align some of the things that are in opposition to Jesus with Jesus. We start thinking about things like, how do we stand for power? How do we stand for accumulation? How do we stand as, with supremacist ideas that we are so much better than others? And we can find ourselves moving in that lane. But the invitation that comes in the book of Luke and in the life of Jesus is that when we begin to take notice of Jesus, we begin to be a people who are changed. And when we are changed, we begin to see our neighbors around us through new lenses. We begin to see the people who we might have overlooked through new eyes. And suddenly we get to have the opportunity not just to be ones who are found as worshipers within these closed doors and these closed settings, but as ones who are followers of Jesus in here and out there, all around, all of the time. And that is when this faith that we call Christianity suddenly becomes something that is worthwhile, something that is challenging, something that has impact to change our world. With that, he's all around us. I hope you take notice of him this week.